Another bait I want to talk a little bit about is a swim bait. You know, a lot of times as these fish move up to spawn, the bigger females, a lot of people, anglers ask me, how do you target bigger fish? Well, of course, bigger baits will a lot of times catch you bigger fish. This is a really, really cool bait. This actually originated in Northern California. This is made by Little Creepers. It's called a trash fish. Okay, it's a weedless swim bait that's designed to be used with an offset hook that has a kind of a screw lock. This happens to be an owner beast hook. It's got a weight that's actually molded onto the shank of the hook. It's a big hook though. This is actually a 7-on owner beast hook. And this swim bait, let that bait settle to the bottom. I can slow wind this bait, and there again, it's weedless. So I can fish this through thick cover, fish it through wood. You can see that with the way that hook has that molded weight on there, it'll actually sit on the bottom and upright. See that fish looking at it, staring it down? Really, really cool bait. Really subtle action on it. Is he going to grab it? This bait is about 6 inches in length. This actually bait was originally designed to mimic the hitch. It's a bait fish that they have in Northern California, especially at Clear Lake where this bait was designed, which I'll definitely look forward to throwing. That's actually our next stop for the FLW Costa Series event here next month in April. This bait's really cool. Like I said, you let it settle at the bottom. You could slow crawl this bait on the bottom. See, I can fish it through, didn't get hung up on the rock. There's a cavity that's embedded inside the top of this bait that actually will hide the hook point, so it stays weedless. But when the fish bite down on it, it easily pops right through the bait. So really, really cool. Doesn't have a lot of action, real subtle, as most of your bait fish are. They don't really have a real erratic action. Real subtle. Again, I'm just fishing this through the water column. You can fish it fast, you can fish it slow. Let's fish it up a little bit higher so you guys can see it just has a little wag. By having that belly weight on there will help keel the bait too. If you speed it up, the bait won't roll to its side because the center of gravity of this bait, the way the weight pulls down on it, really helps keel that bait. Of course, with the gear that I use for this, because it is a heavier gauge hook and a bigger bait, I use a heavier rod. This is a 711 Zillion. It's actually a heavy crankbait rod, designed for a 10XD. I really like this rod for this style of bait because it's not a real heavy bait. It's the same type of rod that I would use for like an Alabama rig or a 10XD that weighs about an ounce to ounce and a half. This is 711 in length. It's a medium heavy rod. Again, the length of the rod is really important with this bait because on a bigger bait, I want to make a long cast. I'm covering a lot of water. I want to get that bait as far away from the boat as I can and a slow retrieve. So a 7.5 to almost 8 foot rod allows me to get the distance that I need to cast that bait out there. So I'm using a Daiwa Tatula 100H. This is a 7.3 to 1 reel. I really like a 6.3 to 1 reel. The gear ratio again is important. I don't want to overwork this bait. I'm just a slow medium retrieve on this bait. So you can let it sit. This is something that even on a bed fish you can pitch on the bed, let it settle in there, and that tail will actually float. As you can see, that tail floats upright. A really natural presentation, a really natural look, and really coax those bigger fish that are moving up shallow to target something like this. Eliminates, obviously you could throw drop shots, smaller baits and stuff to catch quantity, but this is actually a bait that you can catch quality with. So you're not going to obviously get a lot of bites on a swim bait, but you can really catch some of the biggest fish that you've ever caught in your life. So again, this is a Little Creepers swim bait, 6 inch in length. This is an owner beast hook. It's about 3/8 ounce molded onto the shank of the hook. It's got a twist that'll actually twist into the head of the bait. So you're not tearing the bait. It actually holds really, really well. I'm using a 711 Zillion, a medium heavy 10XD/A rig rod to use this bait. And I'm using braided line. I'm using the same 50-pound FX Sunline braid that I was using on the Whopper Plopper, but I will use a fluorocarbon leader on this. But of course, I'll bump the fluorocarbon leader up. I'll go to 20-pound FC Sniper. There again, I'm using heavier hook, heavier line, so I want to make sure I've got enough cushion there. I want a little bit of give, but because I'm using a fluorocarbon leader with this opposed to the Whopper Plopper, I'm fishing this much slower and fishing it on the bottom. I want that fluorocarbon leader. I don't want them to detect the line. Plus, I want that fluorocarbon leader that sinks to allow that bait to stay on the bottom, okay? Really slow crawl, as you can see. So, again, this is something really that can be used year-round. I really like this as we're going into the springtime. So the bigger females are moving up. I can target those bigger fish by using a swim bait, especially after I've caught a limit in the boat. I'm looking for that one kicker fish. Swim bait is definitely something I always resort to. This is something kind of new. Like I said, originated in Northern California, so a lot of people here in Arizona haven't seen a trash fish by little creepers. So something I wanted to throw, kind of give you guys a little bit different look, different swim bait. Really looks good down there in the bottom. They have this in different colors. This happens to be a hitch color. They make this obviously in bluegill patterns, baby bass, shad, different varieties. But you can see how that tail floats upright. Really, really cool bait. This is called a Niko Rig. And with the Niko Rig, the cool thing about this is you wacky rig your favorite bait, but you actually put weight inside the head of the bait, and that'll allow a completely different fall than anything else you've thrown. So this bait is really finesse. I'll pitch this bait out there. This is actually a Zoom trick worm. Yesterday I was throwing a Zoom finesse worm, which is a little bit smaller in length, 4.5 inches. This is actually about 6 inches. As you can see, just sitting on the bottom, that tail's freely floating up because all the weight is favored to the head. It's inside the head. I've used a tungsten nail weight. This happens to be 3/32 in weight. I'm using a little Gamakatsu size 1 drop shot split shot hook that I use for this bait. The one key with this, which I'll show you later, is I use shrink tubing to actually put onto the worm to attach the hook to it. I never actually hook the plastic with that shrink tubing, and I cut a little section of it, and I'll slide it on from the tail first, slide it onto the bait, favoring more of the head size, get a lighter, and I'll actually heat it on there so it'll actually shrink down onto the worm, which is really, really cool. By doing that, not only will you salvage your bait, as you can see here, when I take that and the fish grabs and I set the hook, it'll actually freely float up the line with that shrink tube, okay? So it's really, really cool. The shrink tubing's flat, so it doesn't cause any resistance. With O-rings, I've had people ask me, you know, Joe, why don't you use an O-ring? Because on a thinner diameter worm like that, it'll actually roll off on the bait a lot easier. So shrink tubing holds its form a lot better, seems to secure onto that smaller bait a lot better, and it's really easy. Obviously, you can go anywhere to purchase any type of shrink tubing. With the diameter that you use, obviously, is depending upon the diameter of the bait that you use. I always want to go a little bit bigger shrink tubing on the bait, because when you heat it on there, it's going to obviously shrink down to the size and form around that bait. So I'll pitch this bait out there again. Pitch it right here in the middle of the tank. A little bit different fall. You can see it sits there, the tail's up. The key with this bait is you don't want to overwork it. I'll sit there and I'll just slightly shake the slack, okay? So I'm shaking that in one spot. That tail is just really moving out there, as you can see, okay? When you bounce that worm, you can actually see how when you lift it up, the head goes down first. You can fish it a little bit more aggressively if you want, but let me set it up here on this rock up here. You guys get a better look at that when it's sitting on the rock. So really cool technique, as you can see. Just barely shake that. Fish is looking at it. Now obviously it's a finesse type technique, so I still use braided line, but I scale down. I'm going to 20-pound test braid, which is the equivalent to about 8-pound test diameter. And I'm using a fluorocarbon leader. I'm using the same Sunline FC Sniper. I go anywhere from 5 to 7-pound test, depending upon, of course, the conditions and how tough the bite is. So, boy, you got a stare down going on there, bluegill and a bass. Huh? So, really cool technique. Again, this is the Niko Rig. I use about a 10 to 12 foot leader of fluorocarbon, attach it to the braid. Obviously different knots out there that you can tie. This is a Slim Beauty knot that I use to attach the fluorocarbon to the braid. There's a lot of there's Uni that you can do. There's Albright. There's Alberto knot that you can tie. So really whatever you're most confident with. So as you can see when I jig that bait up there, boy, he got fired up on that, didn't he? Has he got it? Yeah, he's got it. On the rod that I use, this is a Steez rod, spinning rod, 7.1 in length. It's a medium action rod. I don't know if he's going to let that go. I'm using a matching Steez spinning reel. This is a 25 in EX 2508H. I like the little bit bigger spinning reel on that. Boy, is he going to let that go? He likes that worm, doesn't he? See if I can see if we can get a head shake out of that. I don't know if he's going to let that go. See, what's nice about this is I don't really even have to, when I'm fishing this light technique with that braided fluorocarbon, you really don't have to set the hook that hard with that braid. The fish kind of set themselves. See that worm hanging out of there. I don't know if he's going to... I don't know, we might have to get that one in. I don't think he's going to shake it. You can see that worm. See how that slid away from that fish? It's not interfering at all with the hook at all. Okay? That's what's cool about using that shrink tubing opposed to just hooking it directly into the plastic. So it's really important that shrink tubing not only going to save more baits, but it'll pull away from the hook so it doesn't get balled up and you lose fish. So this is definitely really cool. I'm going to have to land this one here. There's one right there. So pull that out. Nice fish. Let that one go. Yeah. So again, that's the Niko Rig. This is a Zoom finesse worm. It's about 6 inches in length. Wide different varieties of colors. I use a tungsten nail weight I'll insert right into the head. And I'll use a Gamakatsu size 1 split shot drop shot hook. Shrink tubing is key on this to really salvage your baits, eliminate lost fish because it'll actually slide away from your hook and won't get balled up around the hook. Again, I'm using a Steez spinning rod, 7.1 medium action rod matched up with a Steez EX 2508H spinning reel. I've got Sunline 20-pound test XX braid with this happens to be 7-pound test FC Sniper fluorocarbon leader. Again, a great technique. Highly recommend you guys try this at your local lakes. It's very effective all across the country. So I appreciate it. Again, I'd like to thank all of you for coming down to the 2016 ISE show. I'd like to thank Wayne with Western Bass for giving me an opportunity to come up here.